morning. Welcome to the Principles of Bookkeeping revision session. This is session 4. Wow, getting through them. This is the last one. My name's Catherine. I'm a tutor here at First Tuition. And tonight we're going to have a look at 7 and 8, 2 tasks. And it's the trial balance task. So first, the task 7 is basically taking information from our T accounts and putting them into a trial balance. It would be a partially extracted trial balance. And then task 8 is having a trial balance to complete, but also having to adjust for a few journal entries that we need to do and make sure we clear the suspense account. It's going to be a trial balance that does not balance. So yeah, a couple of quite nice tasks just to round off this exam. So first of all then, task 7, let's get the highlighter going. Another 10-mark task, this one, and we are looking at extracting a trial balance. So what we mean by that is that we're going to be given a selection of accounts to balance off, and it's about taking those balances over to the trial balance and placing them in the correct column on the trial balance. Yeah. So you really need to know what accounts we've got that are credits and which ones that are debits. So with that in mind, there's not much to this task briefing, but just keep an idea of dead click in your mind. So if you've got any expenses or any assets, and you might have a drawings account, but it's only one account on its own, any accounts that fall into those types will have a debit balance on the trial balance. On the flip side, any liabilities, so things like loans or the payables under control account is another good liability. Any income accounts, so that's like our sales account, or like it says their interest received, that's a good one. And then our capital account, if you get that, all those accounts or types of accounts should have a credit balance. The other thing to think about is if you are given accounts to balance off and you're only given the space to put in a balance carried down, whatever side your balance carried down is, your balance brought down, the balance that you take for the trial balance will be on the other side. So if you've got, so you've got an asset account like the bank or something, your balance carried down is on the credit side, which would then mean your balance brought down goes onto the debit side, and then the balance of the bank account and the trial balance will also be a debit. So just make sure you are, using that balance enough knowledge that you will have had from your introduction to bookkeeping unit to make sure that you are completing this properly and transferring across. You may have other accounts in the trial balance to put onto the right side as well. But it might be that they've given you the balance for that already. You've got to put it in the debit or the credit column, depending on what type of account it is. Yeah. So let's crack on and have a look at a task, because there's not much that task briefing at all. It's a very practical task. What we might end up doing is splitting the pages on this, because unfortunately task 7 does go over 2 pages. So we're back with Dippy Dogs. It's been Dippy Dogs or Cool Cats, hasn't it, I think, for most of this. So most of the ledgers for Dippy Dogs have been closed off and the balances are listed. However, we've got some remaining ledger accounts and we have to complete those by inserting a balance carried down on each account. So we don't have enough space for a balance brought down, just a balance carried down. So we've got petty cash, we've got capital, we've got the bank loan, and we've got the telephone account. Yep, so that's going to be 4 marks there. So I hope that actually nothing new from this unit is being tested there. That is straight out of the introduction to bookkeeping unit, which you will have done already. And then part B, we're going to have a look at a bit, complete the trial balance by inserting the missing figures. So the figures from those accounts in part A, then need to pop into the trial balance and say debit or credit along with some others. Now you'll see, if you've got it in front of you, that the trial balances go over 2 pages, which is a bit of a shame. So you've got quite a lot of amounts already there. You've got to say whether they're debits or credits, but also slot in the amounts from part A. So we'll go back to the top and start at the very beginning. Now, I'm expecting that this should be a fairly easy one to do. So we'll start off with our petty cash account. What is our balance carried down going to be on our petty cash account now? Anyone want to hazard a guess at that? I will explain it as well, just for anybody. What do we think? Yes, I agree. I get 120 as well. Basically, what we've done is we've said, right, we've got 340 and 80 on the debit side, which gives us a total of 420. However, until we put that 120 in, the credit side only had 300, and we need to get up to 420 as the total. So we'll plug in, yeah. And then that is our balance carried down that we're going to take into the petty cash account. So what do we do for the capital account? There's not much on the capital account, so it's a bit of an easy one to do. What's our balance carried down for this one? Yeah, spot on, 20,000. We've got the initial balance brought down, which is our capital balance from the previous period. Add in another 10, so the owner has put in another £10,000 of their own money, which has gone into the bank and then into our capital account to report them as well. So add those two together. So our balance on that account now is £20,000. The 10,000 originally plus that 10,000 is coming from the owner. Another fairly easy one, bank loan account, balance on that. We haven't got a balance to bring forward, but we have got £10,000 that's come in. Well, it's come into the bank. We've taken that loan out. So at the moment, we owe £10,000 back to the bank for that loan, in very basic terms. So that's going to be the amount that goes to the bank loan on the trial balance. And then the last one then, what is our balance on the telephone account for the telephone expenses? What do we think? We've got 450 and 250. What does that give us? Lovely, thank you very much. Yes, 700. Yeah. So hopefully 4 pretty straightforward marks there out of the 10 on this task. And we now get the other 6 by putting the figures into our trial balance. What I would do with this is I'd just take each one, pop it in to the amount column on the trial balance, because then that gives you, you don't have to sort of scrolling backwards and forwards too much. Capital was 20,000. Just going to go over the page. The bank loan was 10,000, wasn't it? And then our telephone expense was 7. You don't need to total, you don't need to put anything in there. It's not required. So now it's a case of going through the trial balance and basically saying, all the amounts, are they going to go in a debit column or the credit column? So we'll start at the top. We've got our petty cash. Now, how do we categorise petty cash? And therefore, where does it go? What type of account is petty cash? Yes, spot on. It's a hard one, that one. It is an asset account because it's our money, isn't it? Yep. So if it's an asset, where does that put it for us? If we think back to our dead clip principles, then it's going to be a debit. No, it's the balance on the petty cash account. If you just go back and have a look, so you can see that we had £80 in the tin. We've then given another 340 in from the bank to top it back up, but we've paid 300 out. So it means that we've got £120 left in our petty cash tin, is what that 120 represents. Right, we'll move back to our trial balance, if that's okay. So cash at bank, I can see that I've had some thoughts on that being a debit. It is a debit because it's another asset account. Yeah. Just be careful. Sometimes it can say, rather than cash at bank, it might say bank overdraft, in which case it all flips around and it becomes a credit. If we've got an overdraft, we owe the bank money and it will be a liability. And then our last one here is our capital account, which goes into a bit of its own. It is a capital type of account. And if we think about dead click, and I can see that it's been put in the chat, the capital account will always have a credit balance. We'll move on to what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you to highlight the ones that are without a bad name because they've written in anyway. We've now got a few more to do. It's not a very big trial balance, this one, but enough for them to ascertain if you know what you're doing with it. What about our machinery then? What type of account is the machinery? It's an asset account because it's stuff that we own. And as has been said in the chat, actually, let me just put on here that that's the debit and that's the credit, so you can see a little bit more easily. Yeah, machinery is a debit. It's an asset, well done, spot on. Now, we've got a few here where the word expense comes up, which hopefully will make life a bit easier for you. So for our rent expense, let's do all of these. For our miscellaneous expenses, our wages expense, and our telephone expense, we will do the same thing. What are we doing with those expenses? We're debiting them. Yes, spot on. Well done. So there's some nice ones you can do. If you see the word expenses in an account like this, we've got telephone or wages or whatever, you can be pretty confident it's going to be a debit. So spot on, well done. So the only ones we've got to sort out now are the bank loan and the motor vehicle. So what is a bank loan? What type of account is that? Yeah, spot on. It's a liability. It's money that we owe to the bank. And we know from our dead click that liabilities will have a credit balance. And then our final one, motor vehicle. What type of account is a motor vehicle? Yeah, it's another asset account. Works like machinery. So another one where we've got an asset account and therefore another debit. It doesn't necessarily ask you to total it up on this, but I would do just to make sure that you've got your debits and credits sort of all in a row. We've actually only got two credit entries. We've got the 20,000 of capital and the 10,000 of bank loan. So our credit side should come to 30,000. So does our debit side come to 30,000? Got 120 of petty cash. This can be a check for you, even if they don't ask for it, just to check that you've got everything put in the right place and make sure that your trial balance balances. Out of these expenses, and I get 30,000. I'm just going to answer that question about motor vehicles because it is confusing. Yeah, it will. If it was an expense account for vehicles, it will have the word expense in it because it's impossible to tell otherwise. So yeah, if it just says motor vehicle, that's the asset account. If it says motor vehicle expenses, that's the expense account. I think that's the only one where you might travel with any other asset accounts. You wouldn't necessarily have like machinery expense or anything like that. But yeah, absolutely, that's what you need to do. Yeah. So our debit side comes to 30,000, as does our credit side. So we are spot on and balanced. Yeah. So yeah, 10 marks there. Hopefully nothing too tricky. Just as we said before, just knowing the debits and credits and knowing what type of account those are. So taking our knowledge of the trial balance a little bit further now for our final task on this assessment, which is task 8, and yet again it's another 10 marker. So rather than pulling balances from the individual accounts and entering them into the trial balance at first stage, we're now looking at redrafting this trial balance because it didn't balance in the first place and the errors have been identified, the journals have been done to correct them, and now all we need to do is pull those adjustments into our trial balance to then make it balance. So yeah, another 10 marker, 11 minutes needed. I think that would be more than plenty, and hopefully you'll agree with me when you see what is required for this one. The first thing they often get you to do in a task like this is they'll say, here's a trial balance that doesn't balance. So a suspense account is needed, if I can get my words out, and you will need to identify what the balance on that suspense account needs to be and whether it will be a debit or a credit to plug the gap. So always make sure that you are going to be entering and putting the balance of the suspense account on the side that was initially lower. So if you've got, I don't know, your debit side comes to 10,000 and your credit side comes to 5,000, the credit side is lower. So we would put a suspense account in with a £5,000 credit balance, and then that means that the debit column and the credit column both come to 10,000. And then you can do all your finding the errors like we've done in other tasks in the program. Yeah. There's another example there, but the one that I just did, I'll just pull the figures out there. So the hard work is done for you to a certain extent on this question, because you don't have to do any of the journal work that's been done for you. And all you're looking to do is take the journals and adjust your trial balance for the accounts involved. There'll only be a few accounts that you will need. So if we've just a couple of things to think about with this is obviously, first of all, what type of account is it? Yeah. So is it an expense? Is it an asset? Is it income? Is it a liability? Is it capital? If it has a debit balance, so it's an asset or it's an expense, or it might be drawings if you were unlucky. If the journal says that you need to debit the account, that will increase the balance on the account by the amount of the adjustment. But if the journal says that the account needs to be credited, it will reduce the value on the account, and therefore you take it off the balance that was originally given. On the flip side, if you've got some credit balances, so like a liability account, or income account, or your capital, like we said, everything switches. So if the journal says credit the account, we'll add that figure on. It's an increase to the account balance, whereas a debit is a deduction and you will reduce the balance. But you'll see this more in practice when you look at the question as well. Yeah. Once you've worked out what the revised figure is, you will need to adjust that on the trial balance in your answer. It might be that they don't give you the whole trial balance, they might give you a small extract of it. But I think it's probably more likely they will give you enough entries that once you've done it correctly, you can check the trial balance with balance, because it's just satisfying, isn't it? Just be really careful about which columns you put your revised figures in. Yeah, make sure you know what you're doing. I don't think they give you anything big enough where suddenly your balance is flipping from a debit to a credit overall, and it's probably going to be an adjustment within, and that account will still set. Whereas there's only certain accounts that could do that with any of that account. So yeah, I don't think it happens. So just as a bit of an example, we've got a telephone expense, and initially on the trial balance, it says the balance was £500. It would be a debit balance because it is an expense account. And then we've got journals that say, well, actually a credit needs to be posted to that telephone expense account. The credit will reduce the balance because we've got 500 debit, then a £50 credit. So the difference between the two is 450 because it's not a debit and a debit. If it's the same type, add them together. If it's the opposite types, then you take them away. If that makes sense. If it's debit plus debit or credit and credit, add them. If it's debit and credit or credit and debit, take them away. Yeah. That would then mean that your revised balance, the balance that you put in the trial balance, will reduce. It'll still be in the debit column, it'll just be £50 less. Okay. Just a reminder there of the dead click, but we did look at that with task 7, so I'm not going to go into that. The important check for you is that through revising the figures that are in the journals, you want to make sure that your suspense account is cleared to nothing. And you need to evidence that in your answer. You need to show that your suspense account will now have a zero balance for debit and credit. So if you are able to put figures in for the suspense account on the debit and credit, I would just put big fat zeros in both of them to show that if you leave something blank, it can sometimes be a case of they might think you've forgotten to put something in there. Whereas if you put a 0 in, you can say, look, I know what I'm doing. I am clearing this suspense account. And then they know that they know what you're about. Yeah. Another one of these satisfying tasks where you can be pretty confident if your trial balance balances at the end, you're all sorted. And the suspense account is cleared when it balances. So let's have a look for our last question on this assessment. So back with Dippy Dogs, they've extracted an initial trial balance which did not balance. That's a surprise. So the debit column has come to 33,200 and our credit column has come to 33,300. So for 1 mark in part A, what entry do we need in the suspense account to make it balance for now? Yeah. No prizes for the account name, it will be the suspense account. And the amount is 100 because it's the difference between the 33,300 and the 33,200. So £100 difference between those two figures. It's our debit side that is lower. So we have to plug the gap on the debit side. So well done for those of you that pop out in the chat. Really well done. Yeah. So then we've now got, we can say, oh, 33,200, add on that 100. It now equals 33,300, just as the credit side does. So we're not out of the woods, but we're getting there in order to get our trial balance to where it should be. So the next day, the journal entries were prepared to correct the errors that have been found and clear that suspense account over. A list of the balances in the initial trial balance is shown below, along with the journal entries that have been provided to correct the errors. So here's our trial balance. There's quite a lot of accounts on this. Well, there's been a handful. And then underneath, you've got 2 journals. You can see that we've had to adjust the sales account and the machinery account, and both of them have involved the suspense account. In part B, you have got a pretty full trial balance here, and there's only going to be 3 accounts that actually need to be adjusted looking at our journal. So we know the suspense account needs to be adjusted, and we know that initially that had an £100 debit balance, didn't it? We know that was, we've just put that in there. So we'll add that in, and then we can show what we're doing. The other journal, the journals are also going to affect the sales account and the machinery account. So I'm just going to highlight those. Okay. Because actually you can get quite a lot of marks out of this task by just doing like we did in task 7, which is to ignore those ones that I've highlighted and just do the entries for all of the others and say, all right, what's a bank debit or credit, receivables debit or credit, payables debit or credit. And you can get those done quite quickly and then come back to the ones that are more difficult. Yeah. And I'll talk to you about how we can do that. So let's do the easy ones first. Okay. So our bank account, again, no mention of the word overdraft. So we can be assuming that money is ours. It's an asset account. So debit or credit on that one. Asset. We would expect that to be a debit. We've then got 2 that are a bit more tricky. Yeah. We've got the receivables ledger control account, first of all. What type of account is the receivables ledger control account? In terms of asset, liability, that sort of thing. Yeah, spot on. It's another asset account. Yeah, it's money that the customers are going to send us eventually. It's not income. Sales is income. Receivables is an asset. Receivables is the money that we're going to be getting in. We've made the sale. That's gone. It's now that represents the money that our customers owe us. It's not income. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a little bit easier for ourselves. I'm going to put the figures in because then we can add them up later. What about our payables ledger control account? How does that differ from the receivables? Yeah, it's money that we owe to our suppliers. So it's a liability, and we know that liability accounts will have credit balances. So there's £3,000 going on our credit side. No prizes for the next one. Our capital account is capital, and it's another one on that credit side of our debit click, isn't it? It's the last C of our debit click mnemonic. I'll leave sales, we'll come back to that. What about purchases then? What type of account would purchases be? And where would it go? Yeah, it's one of our expenses. Yep, so we talked about this in task 7. Purchases, form of expense, so therefore it's going to be a debit. And then actually we've got the next 4 accounts are all expense accounts. Yep, so that kind of makes our life very easy, and we can just put those figures in on the debit side like we did for the purchase. So we've got a nice building block to our trial balance here. So we now need to have a look at those 3 accounts that we need to store. Okay, machinery is an asset account and sales is income. Now, what I would do, just to make things a little bit more easier on yourself, is this will be where I pull out my blank paper in the exam and start to make some notes and scribbles. And I do a T account for each of these. Sorry that this is on a separate sheet. I just thought it kind of, we were a bit cramped for room. So we know our suspense account had £100 debit. Machinery is an asset. So if we're going to put a figure in the trial balance, we'd expect it to be on our debit side as our assets are. So we know that 10,200 should be there. And our sales is income. So that 20,300 that we had as our initial figure is going to be sitting on the credit side of our account because income. So we now need to add in what the journal is telling us to do. So journal number 1 is saying we want a £300 debit to the sales account and a £300 credit to the suspense. So we'll go on to that and do that. So sales, £300 debit, suspense, £300. And then journal 2, we're this time going to debit suspense with 200 and credit the machinery with 200. So actually, in both cases, we're going to be reducing the amount that's given. Yeah. First thing to check, does our suspense account have anything left over? We've got 300 as the value of the transactions on the debit side and also 300 on the credit side. So that is now cleared. Yep, so we can go back to our trial balance and very confidently say no balance left on that account at all. And that's all done. You can see we've got some answers in the chat, which is great. So our machinery, we've got 10,200 on the debit, 200 on the credit. So we've got a £10,000 difference. So I've carried down. But then our brought down to go on the trial balance will be on the debit side. So it's still on the debit side like we had. It's just that it's come down by £200. So the amount is different from what we had on the initial balance. And then our final one, sales, we've got 20,300 on the credit side. We need to get the debit side matching up. So we're going to put 20,000 in to put the gap. Then becomes our balance brought down, sorry. And that's what's going to go to the trial balance. So our sales is now, it was 20,300. It's now 20,000. So Have we got a trial balance that balances now based on the figures that we have been given there? What does it come to? Do we get it back to what we need it to be? I'm interested to see what you think when you tot it all up. Right, I get this now for the debit side. I also get that for the credit side. So I've just added up those figures on both columns, and now it comes back to the same figure, and our suspense account is showing as 0. So we know that we've hit the 2 things that we need to do in order to succeed in this task. And that is your exam paper done. There are examples of journals we have to do with suspense. Oh, I'm sure I did them on a previous session. I haven't got anything prepared, but I can have a look. So yeah, I'll stop the recording there because that's task 8 done. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the sessions for that, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.